And we are live. Welcome to the EBFC show live stream. It is a beautiful Tuesday in California. My name is Felipe Engineer Manriquez. I'll be hosting this installment of the EBFC show live stream. I've got a very special guest for you today, and I just want to thank everybody for joining us today, taking some time. If you're on the West Coast, it's lunchtime. Grab your favorite snack. We can't see you chewing with your mouth open. That's all good if you do that. And if you're watching this on the replay and you don't have a snack, hit pause and go get one. So I want to encourage everybody to go ahead and exercise those fingertips. If you're on your keyboard and you want to leave a comment while it's live, we'll definitely take and bring forward some of those things. And if you're watching this on a replay and you leave a comment afterwards, I will respond to all of your comments, especially those that have questions that I should respond to. So I just want to thank everybody for joining us. I'm going to bring forward right now, without further ado, Mr. Mike Williams.
Hello, Felipe. Thank you for having me. I've already started at a deficit. I didn't get a snack. You didn't tell me in the pregame about snacks, so I'm starting in a hole already. You know, I might fade out as we go here.
Stay with me.
Yeah,
I'll give you my energy so we can keep it. We'll keep you alive and keep you going. So, okay. Mike, why don't you go ahead and tell people, Snackless Mike Williams, tell people a little bit about yourself. Introduce yourself.
Yeah. So, Mike Williams, or Michael Williams, Felipe and I were just discussing that before we went live. I'm with Stantec. In my career, my entire 33-year architectural career has been dedicated to healthcare architecture. Over that time, I became familiar with lean processes in the late 1990s, value stream mapping specifically. In the mid portion of my career, I had the opportunity to work on some early phase, true IPD, true lean delivery projects, mid 2000s, if you will, and have had experience in 4 to 5 large big room situations. So with that, I was approached by LCI. I had been the community of practice leader for Arizona. I was approached by LCI to be the chairperson for the Lean Congress this year. So it'll be held in Phoenix, and I am in Phoenix, by the way. So that's a very short synopsis of my career. Healthcare, lean delivery. I'm a process-oriented guy. So that's all you need to know to start with.
That's perfect. And ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Mike Williams has been a guest of the EBFC show before. Check out season 1, the episode with Mike Williams. Disruption has arrived. So our show's coming out every 2 weeks. Mike's one of my favorite shows. I love it, especially the clip shows where we talk about the iceberg that we've been calling out, the two of us together, not just me. And as Mike said, ladies and gentlemen, registration's open. What are you waiting for? LCI Conference in person. Hello. You can learn all the cool stuff that Mike and I play with every single day, as we have for probably collective decades now between the two of us, Mike. I'd say you got a little one up on me on that, but I'm catching up quickly. I'm a quick learner, especially with a good teacher like yourself. So, Mike, I want to just dive right in to the topic. Why don't you give people a little bit of background on what we're sharing? And ladies and gentlemen, we are sharing a Scrum story today. So you're in for a treat.
So it's a project that started in 2017 here in Phoenix. I was at my previous employer at the time, HMC Architects, and we won a project to do a large expansion and remodel of Banner Boswell Medical Center out in Sun City, Arizona. Hospital built in the 1960s, late 1960s, early 1970s, largely. Project encompassed about 300,000 square feet when we got done with it. Multi-phase addition, remodel to a building that was lacking documentation. So, your average hospital project. McCarthy was the GC selected. So I'll back up. So the Banner Health is moving, inching closer and closer to true IFOA IPD. They have, at this point in time in 2017, they had successfully done about 3 or 4 IPD-like large scale projects. So this was yet another one. And most of our team that won the project had just come off a true IPD, IFOA, very successful project in Las Vegas for a competitor of Banner Health. So while we were under a CMAR contract and a design services contract on the design side, Banner agreed to bring an entire team together almost day one to validate the project up front. So we spent about 3 months in validation. We had all of the major trades. We had stud and drywall. We had steel. We even had the curtain wall vendor in the room, along with the GC and a wide owners team, doing a true IPD delivery, if you will. We validated the project. Banner went and secured the funding. In 3 months, the team reassembled and we started design. So what we're going to talk about today is how we applied Scrum to the RFI process. So fast forward, we've put the documents out. McCarthy is now moving to the field with the big work. We've done an enabling project that helped us keep the hospital operations moving forward while we were building the large portion of the project. So we were sitting around on I think it was a late Thursday afternoon after the big room. We were co-located for 3 days a week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, with our big room meeting being Thursday at the end of the week. We were sitting around discussing, okay, how does the design team stay actively involved in the kind of collaborative process as we move to the field? So for those who are not designers listening today, typically in that construction administration process is where design teams can get upside down. And it typically comes in waves. The initial waves are hundreds of RFIs. The GCs have their project engineers working away feverishly, creating RFIs and gathering together all of the submittals. And they hit us all at once with 75 submittals and 50 RFIs, and the clock starts ticking. We want them all back in 5 days.
Exactly.
That's the architect side of it. So we started talking as a group. The PM for McCarthy, I think the PM for the electrical subcontractor, and members of the design team. And you had come out about a month prior to this time, maybe 2 months prior, and you were helping the McCarthy team internally with Scrum. So there was a Scrum board in the back of the big room, if you will, in one of the small conference rooms that they had been running. And you and I had talked about it several times. I sat in there and watched you guys do that. And I thought, well, this is interesting. So 2 things for me that are key. Visualization of the work is key for me. As I've told you before, as I've done these big rooms again and again, I've kind of started off thinking the tools were important, and I thought the behaviors were the most important thing. And it's a mixture of the two, obviously, but visualizing the work is what I really believe. As we've said before, you walk into a room, the accountability of not having your tag crossed off or not having the work that you were supposed to have done, that creates very good behaviors in a large big room session. So I looked at what you were doing. I saw visualizing and I saw accountability. And I thought, okay, this is interesting. Let's watch this. And I had a cursory understanding of Scrum. And I mean, if you remember correctly, I questioned you hard.
Oh my God. Mike was like a 5-year-old that had just woken up from a long night's sleep, and he was full of questions, which was awesome. And I kept telling him, I was like, come on, give me more questions. It's good.
Yeah. And you questioned me on my strengths finders. And when you found out my number 1 was restorative, you're like, oh, okay, I see what you're doing. You're solving the problem. And yes. That's exactly. I'm defining the problem first, and then I'll move to the next step. But so we saw that, and Matt LaFlamme, who was part of the team at the time, and he's here with us at Stantec now too. He had seen all that, and we were talking about submittals and RFIs, and he said, well, what if we look at Scrum overlaid with the RFI process? And we especially, he was interested in the prioritization part of the backlog, if you will, how you prioritize things. So, you're pulling the work. You're only pulling the work that needs to be done in the sequence it needs to be done in, right? So that that's a thing that we see oftentimes in architecture. And he had a great kind of quote about that. He said, "Why am I looking at the fire extinguisher cabinets when we're digging holes on the site? Why is that the open RFI for 6 months, that we talk about every OAC meeting, in the old days when we're going down the beautiful spreadsheets of RFIs that we typically did." So that was kind of our rallying cry. Okay, so how can we do this? So the other thing we find in RFI process, and it's nobody's fault in particular. I mean, when you pump out 1,400 sheets of drawings, not everybody has read all of those. And then we love to have the spec that, when you haven't fully read the drawings, we hand you the 1,400 pages of spec and say, well, did you look in here? So we
had some really experienced high-level construction managers that have done construction management since it was a thing. And they told me that on average, it's their experience that every drawing sheet should generate at least 10 RFIs. And they said that that's normal. And I said, it's not normal. It's not normal, but that's just what's out there, Mike. So keep going.
So we often see a lot of RFIs are, what I call the hunt for information. I don't have a chance to look. I'm busy out in the field trying to do stuff. I got something in front of me. I need an answer. So the RFI flies in. And so we often saw those as ones that could be avoided had we been able to talk to that person ahead of time. So at this point in time, we had a 3-day work week co-location and big room still in place. And we decided that, okay, we'll look at this. If everyone agrees, we can have a pending section before our backlog section in the Scrum. So pending was all of the questions go up on that board before they get memorialized in Procore. So those are all tags, just open tags. Foreman from the underground comes in and throws up a couple of tags about where the inverts are, or I found this line, were we expecting this, those sorts of things. Those go up, and then the entire team would get together every Tuesday and look at those, and we would say, okay, yeah, there's a dozen up here. 2 of these are RFIs that we need to answer. The other 10 aren't, and we can help you find the information in the documents for those. And those were person-to-person communications. So what happened there was 2 of those went into Procore, became RFIs, and we had a special tag we made. So the tag for each one of these, if you can imagine a swim lane for each portion of the project where
I'll bring a picture of
yeah, throw a picture up. So you can see the swim lanes there, and the swim lanes were for each large portion of the project or drawing set. And we did underground separate from the enabling project and so on. So we started putting these up there, and the tag we assigned each design discipline a different colored dot, because many of these were multi-discipline answers. So, you've got something underground you found, and you got to move a footing, you got to alter a footing, you've got structural, architectural, civil, mechanical involved. So we would put each one of those dots on the RFI, and then we would prioritize them based on when we thought we needed answers. And it actually, where the person standing who took this photograph is standing right next to the pull plan. So we would be able to reference the pull plan when the crews were working in certain areas when we needed to get answers. So we prioritize. And when the tag would move from the to-do list, prioritized, into doing, that typically happened in a formal meeting every Tuesday. We would move those tags over. We would have all of the design disciplines present, the people who were managing the CA process, and we would also have the foreman and PM level people for each one of the trades and GC present. So it was a pretty big group, 12, 14, 16 people, depending on what phase of the project we're in. So we would all agree, prioritize, this one moves over, and then each one of those colored dots, as we process the RFIs, we would come back Thursday during the big room. So Tuesday, we would do the big Scrum event. We would have a half-hour report out in the big room with the scrum board. So the big room, the scrum board was in the big room. So it was just look on this wall. Somebody would get up and report out about where we were. If we had answers for one of the disciplines, we checked off the dot. So at any given time, you could walk in and see the status of the RFI, where it was in doing, and say structural had done their information, mechanical had done their information, architecture had not, and civil had not. So then you could have a focused discussion in the big room. So we still on time to get that tag cleared? Yes. Okay, architect and civil engineer, where are you guys in this process? Do you need anything? So these were the discussions that took place. And then when we got done with the tag, we first just had a done area. Done. And we said, we'll put all the tags in there. How long do we leave them in there? Well, a lot of answers from RFIs end up in ASIs. They end up in change orders. So we decided to have a couple of done columns, if you will. And we also added one for review, because there were ones that were strictly mechanical or electrical. Because we have to manage our contracts, the architect is the person contracted, so the architect had to review them. So we would have done in review, and then once they were reviewed, they moved to a change order or they moved to an ASI. So what we would do is group them by ASI. So everyone can see the next ASI coming out will have those 5 answers.
That's beautiful. And Mike, we got a question from one of my good friends, Amr. So Amr is asking, in order to be proactive and limit the number of RFIs that are coming down later down the road, what should be done? And you talked about that filtering process, that pre-screen. If
Right.
has not done that pre-screen, what does it mean to designers having to answer RFIs that are not screened? What does that do to your productivity?
Well, if we're under a kind of a traditional process where, once the RFI is received by the architect, there's the 5-day, stopwatch that starts. And then we go back into OAC meetings, and, the owners come away, or the entire team comes away with, there's 7 out of 15 RFIs that are unanswered, and they're more than 5 days late. Nobody ever remembers the fact that maybe we're talking about the rubber base and the fire extinguisher cabinets, and we're still doing the underground. Nobody remembers that. They just remember that the architect has got a bunch of RFIs outstanding, and they've been outstanding for 23 days. GCs love to have the little counter clock about how many days these are behind. But I've always challenged them to say, okay, how about the counter clock of when you actually needed it? And
that exists to make sure that we don't buy software that tells us that, Mike. You know that.
Yeah, well, you do formulas in Excel that tell you that. So we've all been in those OAC meetings, and a lot of that, in my opinion, is waste, because we talk about a bunch of RFIs and things are out of sequence. Now, if you're buying out the project early on and you need to know the answer on rubber base and fire extinguisher cabinets, that's one thing. We'll have that discussion. We'll prioritize those. But I think the key piece is to have that discussion. When RFIs just come flying in large bunches, and oftentimes there's a team of people on the design side looking at these, and they've had no discussion with the people who sent the RFI. It's electronic, right? And all of those Procore RFI tags say exactly the same thing. That this is an important question to the answer to keep the project on schedule and avoid delays, blah, 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 blah. And so having that discussion in this kind of pending bin, if you will, on a Scrum is invaluable. Now, that pending area had an average of 25 to 30 tags in it all the time that we were validating were true RFIs. The to-do had anywhere from 8 to 12 at any given time.
You're filtering about half. So, Amr, that's a fantastic question. You can hear what just happened in a matter of seconds in a face-to-face conversation, which is one of the Agile main values, interactions between the people over anything else. I mean, there's something else to that, but the focus on the people is so critical. And then what that did for Mike's team, the whole team there, is that's an RFI that even the McCarthy did not have to enter into the system, and we didn't have to track on a log and talk about it at a meeting and put on a report. I mean, that saved time for everybody. Everybody saved time by not having that. So thank you for that beautiful question. Mike, one more comment from out here in the audience before we go back on the story. This is from my buddy Hussein. Hey, Hussein, it's good to see you. He said he likes the notion of going through that as a team, and he's a lean thinker himself. And there it is, right there. It's almost like he was talking right to Amr. It's beautiful. So I just love that people are acknowledging. Go ahead, Mike.
I would tell him, if you said, how many did you say? 10 RFIs per sheet?
Yeah, that's what the team told me.
So we had a project that took the better part of 22 months. COVID did have a little bit of a drag on that as it was finishing up last year. 300,000 plus square feet. I think the total number of sheets and all the packages eclipsed 1,000. So we had about 400 RFIs total. And of those, about 180 to 190, I forget the last count, were what we call confirming RFIs for existing conditions. When we uncovered an existing condition we expected, we memorialized that with a confirming RFI, things like that. So I would say, on a project that size, traditionally delivered, I think, most people out there who do projects of similar size and complexity would see north of 5 to maybe even 800. Banner had been seeing, close to 1,000 on projects of similar size across a couple of large projects recently they had done. So yeah, we were able to cut down the number of RFIs. And like you said, that's waste in the system. That's waste in the system. You cut that down, you get to the answers, you keep people moving. I mean, RFIs have the ability to stop work if they're not answered properly, or if they're not fully understood, or if the person who wrote them didn't fully understand what they were writing. Oftentimes we have some of the less experienced project engineers trying to interpret what's coming from the field into an RFI, and sometimes those have to go back to the system once or twice. I think this process allowed us to focus on the RFI, get the language right, get it distributed to the people who needed it distributed to, and then process it in the time we agreed upon. So some of these we agreed upon more than 5 days because they were complicated. Some of these we turned around between Tuesday and Thursday. In fact, I would say, I think the team who comes and presents this, so maybe we should back up, Felipe, both of us.
Back up.
Very beginning to the fact that this is going to be a live lab presented at Congress. So I think the team who is going through that, they're digging into a little bit more of the data. But I think what they'll show is probably half of these RFIs or more were processed between Tuesday and Thursday. Nobody wanted to come to the big room and not have their tags done again. Visual accountability.
Absolutely. And if you're watching this on the replay, you're watching this live, in the description on YouTube and on LinkedIn, you can see a link. There's a hyperlink to Link Construction's website, and the title of this presentation is there. And if you don't see it, send me a message afterwards, send me a comment, and I'll put the title and the links back in as a response if you don't see it, because we'll treat it like an RFI, and I'll try to answer you back within 24 hours. How's that, Mike?
Yeah. Good luck. I'll put it on the top of my spreadsheet and start counting.
Yeah. So this type of thing, like Mike is saying, there's going to be a team presenting this in person live in Phoenix, Arizona, beautiful Phoenix, Arizona in October, which is a really good time to be in Arizona.
Yep.
And they're going to have the ability to make an interactive session with people so that you can see a deeper dive into the data and they can talk and answer more of your questions. We do have another comment from Keith. Keith wanted to say, let me just bring us down here. Keith said, keep it in mind, this team had co-located, which does absolutely, Keith is on point here, magnifies the accountability and the commitment of the partnership. And that's one of the things that I love in this story, Mike. I mean, absolutely love Scrum. Hello. But I also love the fact that the client chose to pursue this as an integrated project team. That gets 2 bells. Yeah. There you go. Thank you. I love an owner that understands the power of collaboration. And then we got one more comment from Amr, and then we'll get back on your story. Shout out to Amr, shouting out to you, Mike. So he loves that. And you're welcome, Amr. Mike is happy to answer your questions. Keep going, Mike.
Yeah, so I just saw the picture of Keith there. So Keith was an integral part of this. He was the structural representative in the big room for the majority of the project, all the way through CA. And I would say that was a shocking picture I just saw of Keith wearing a suit and tie. Not obvious.
So people can see it.
Yeah, and so it took a while to. I saw Keith solely, and I saw the picture. I had to connect the two.
Was it like you saw this picture and you were like that?
Yeah, just about. Yeah. But no, Keith, and a few other people will be at this live lab. In fact, most of the people who are going to be at the live lab are the people who actually took part in it. And I think what they're actually going to do is act out um, the actual RFI process in front of everybody and explain it. But yeah, at the end of the day, we were able to, I believe, increase the efficiency of the CA process significantly. There was no delays to the GC or to the team due to the processing of RFI. Sometimes what we uncovered, was uncomfortable and it took a while to design around it. But that's par for any course, right? That's what happens when you're dealing with, as I set it up, an old project with limited documentation, and what documentation there was limited in its accuracy. So the interesting part was, as we gathered these for the cost impact and the ASIs, everybody had, the PMs. So we have the project engineers producing the RFIs with the people in the field who got to build it. Then we've got the managers who've got to account for it monetarily, right? And all the hours on site and all that. So for them to be able to look at the board and see the cost impact ones, how they were going to be gathered into ASIs, when the ASIs were going to be issued. So we tried to be as transparent in that process as possible. But sometimes we would gather together 7 or 8 or 10 RFIs. They did have a minimal cost impact, but they had to be documented. So the team had to go away and actually do the ASI document to then reissue it to the team. So everyone was waiting for those, because that gets into the invoicing, right? So we did all that collaboratively as well as a team. We would have a portion of the big room where we would talk about where we stand with invoicing, what's behind, what's on time, all of those sorts of things. So this played directly into that. And we were told by the people at McCarthy, it really helped them understand the cash flow of the project a lot better. And I think Banner actually appreciated it as well, because they could see the forward-looking cash flow a little better as well.
Yeah, I think most large owners require, for how they do the financing of the jobs, it's critical that they get to know what the burn rate is of the project finances, so they can stay on top of it with their accounting folks and their finance folks. I'm talking about large capital construction builders like hospital systems and universities and schools. Super critical. And Mike, I mean, just incredible. All these side benefits from using Scrum. So for those that don't know, Scrum is a project management framework. Think of it like scaffolding that you put up temporarily to give you some structure around how to deliver. And then when the project's over, you dismantle the scaffolding, you set everybody free to go Scrum again in the future. And I'm happy to say that a lot of the people that were on this project I've bumped into since the project's been done. Let me just show some more beauty shots again of this beautiful job. And Mike, you can talk to what these elevations are, but I know that people are continuing to use Scrum. I know that Mike Williams himself, every LCI Congress planning team meeting is using Scrum, and the planning team is just exceeding all previous records for getting done. So put that in your head.
We are doing well with Scrum. I would have to say, Felipe, you're the one managing the Scrum through Trello. I've kind of waved my hands and take credit as I just did there. But no, it's a fantastic system. It's a framework. Personally, my teams were connecting Scrum to pull planning. And we look at a tag off of a pull plan as a release of work in the design process, a release of work or a release of information, whichever one you want to use. And then we take that tag back to the office and we look at the actual tasks that have to be done to clear that tag in the amount of time. So we do sprints based on our pull plan tags for the future week, if you will, or future 2-week look ahead. And you taught me that. You taught me how to integrate Scrum into anything. So when I first was questioning you hard, I said, well, what kind of tasks do you do in Scrum? I'm looking at the tasks you were doing with your team. It was, open a requisition, call a material supplier, this sort of stuff. So I was trying to figure out, more directly what the benefit was, because at the time, if you have a tag up there to call somebody, it would seem to me that standing around and talking for 5 minutes about who you're going to call would seem counterproductive. But in the greater scheme of things, you were releasing work to other people. which I think was the thing that kind of clicked in my head is, okay, this is a deeper dive into the task level. At least I can use it as a deeper dive into the task level of what I need to do to clear a particular pull plan tag. And then Matt had the great idea of hey, let's take this to RFIs. We tried it with submittals. We did another thing with submittals. Maybe we'll talk about that sometime. That helped us reduce the waste of that process. But we couldn't find a way to apply this to submittals as easily. But RFIs was where it really shined for us.
Beautiful. Mike, could you just tell people what they're seeing in these two pictures of the buildings, just so for some context?
Yeah, so this is the addition, large addition to the building. Banner Health has a templated tower design. So in this case, you're looking at the top picture is the northeast corner of the building, and then the elevation below that is the north elevation of the building, the main entry. So this particular project essentially replaces most of the acute care areas of the existing hospital. Over time, they'll build out these floors. So right now, a lot of the upper floors are shelled, and Banner will build those out as capital allows over the next few years. And as they do that, they'll be decanting all of those beds out of the existing hospital. There's some large shelled spaces that allow them to move over some of their diagnostic and treatment functions. And over time, kind of abandon a hospital where the infrastructure is failing. So what you can't see in these pictures is kind of behind that top one to the right is the old facility that was built in the early 1970s. So that's kind of an overview of the project. The large functioning piece of this was a new geriatric ED. So this is in Sun City, Arizona. One of my favorite comments from one of the physicians out there was, Sun City, Arizona is where old people go to visit their parents. So it's a very elderly population. So the ED itself is designed around a geriatric patient. So that was one of our conditions of satisfaction, quite frankly, which helped align the team toward what we were going to build as well.
No, thank you for that, Mike. And ladies and gentlemen, registration is wide open. Get in there. Seats are filling up fast. I will be there with Mike Williams and this entire team presenting on this project to go deeper into how Scrum enabled less waste in the RFI process, which I absolutely love. Mr. Mike Williams, thank you so much for spending this time with me. I'm going to give you the last word before I close out the show.
Well, thank you, Felipe. I think these messages, as we have successes, I think all of us should be sharing these. These are not proprietary messages in any way, shape, or form, in my opinion. And I appreciate the opportunity to come on and talk about it. I think the live lab will be really interesting. I think all of the live labs, quite frankly, are going to be interesting. And I hope LCI continues to build that portion of Congress. I think the more we can put people in action in these things we do in true IPD projects that create a lot of value, the better that will be for everybody. So thank you.
You are welcome, Mike. Very special thanks to my guest, Mr. Mike Williams. This has been another The EBFC Show broadcast. Everybody, I want you to go out there and wave to Mike. Bye-bye, Mike. Ladies and gentlemen, let's go build something. Stay safe, everybody. Bye-bye.